Hey buddy, it's Chris over at Dixieland Farm, and today I thought I would talk about digital audio, some misconceptions that a lot of people have. I see it a lot of times on forums, Facebook group, other people's videos, and vinyl analog lovers think digital is the devil, and I am here to clear up some of these things. Hopefully Tudor will be happy that I'm making this video since he is a digital guy as well. I still have to make a video about my digital audio server and setup. I still haven't done that yet. I want to do it right, so I've been pushing it off. But one thing here, this picture right here, I think you've seen a lot of times on why digital audio is no good. The stair step. They're trying to show you that a sine wave can never equal a pure analog sine wave. However, this picture is inaccurate. Let's take CD audio that samples at 44,100 times a second, right? So it's sampling that many times. People are under the impression that you are hearing like a movie, like a frame rate, like, you know, there's 24 frames in film that you're hearing, you're seeing an image and then black, and then an image and black. That's what's happening with digital audio, but just really, 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 really fast. And that is not the case. It is being sampled that many times, but the digital analog process more looks like that. Now that looks a lot different than that. So people say, well, I could hear the difference. Well, this is what is, visually more accurate of what's going on. Then there is a digital to analog converter that it'll jump between the voltages in the sample. So when it does its job, because all a digital analog converter is doing is converting something to an analog AC signal. That's what it'll end up doing. Now, whether it's got enough information is often debated. There's arguments on both sides. I'm not going to really get into that. However, if you were thinking that you were hearing stuttering audio just so compacted that it sounded like real audio, that is not what's happening. All speakers is a analog AC waveform, and when the digital analog converter has done its job, it is giving you an AC waveform as well. Positive voltage, negative voltage. That's it. That's what drives your speakers. Positive voltage and negative voltage. The other thing that confuses a lot of people is the term compression, because compression can mean to squeeze something. So there is compression of audio where the highs and the lows are closer to one level. Not so high, not so low. So there's that kind of compression. Now, CD remastering, what is in vogue for the last 15 years, is making everything even, because that way when you turn up the volume, everything sounds as loud as possibly can, because there's no highs, there's no lows. That's compression of audio frequencies, right? The volume is compressed, and radio stations used to do that in the past to make themselves a little more even with their competitors. Classical stations, NPR, tended to not have nearly as much compression, and there's actual reasons why compression is used in radio stations. But then the music business started doing that too. They wanted their single to sound louder than their competitors, because loud is catchy. And then eventually it started getting out of hand, and then everything is very compressed. So there's the idea of dynamic range, how high and how low the volume is, a dynamic range. And vinyl has a slightly inferior, they say, dynamic range compared to a CD, which is true, but almost all the music that you listen to, it doesn't really matter anyway, because it's only like a 20 dB dynamic range at best, and really since the 90s, 10 or less, even less. And there's actually computer sampling programs that will give you a dynamic range value that you can see exactly how loud things really are in comparison to old masters and stuff like that. Anyway, so there's that one type of compression. And this is what confuses people. So vinyl records aren't nearly as compressed because they were made at a time when that just wasn't in vogue. It's not that they can't have that kind of compression. They can. And that is also a misconception. It's just not done. But a vinyl record could have that kind of compression where it's all one tone. You could play one tone like that on a record. You know, there's no range on that. So, of course, it's possible. But during cutting, there are certain things that are done due to the limitations of the vinyl record. You know, bass is centered and modified so that way the needle doesn't jump out of the record. And all of those factors of mastering a vinyl record tend to make a better sound than what is possible on a CD. Doesn't mean that it should be done on a CD or that it's better. It's not better usually. So that's one kind of compression. Then you've got lossless compression. You'll see people say that they can hear the difference between a FLAC and a CD, and that is impossible because a lossless compression means compressing everything down digitally, data-wise, so when it uncompresses, like a zip file, it's the same data. Think of it like a space saver bag, like you see on TV. You put all your clothes in that, you put a vacuum cleaner on it to make everything small, and then you open up the seal and the air comes rushing back in and you've got the clothes that you had. Then there is lossy compression. That means throwing away stuff you don't need that you're not going to hear. So let's think of a freezer. You bought too much food, so you start taking food out of the freezer, out of its packaging to fit it all in the freezer. And you start getting, creative with it. That's a kind of that's like lossy compression. It's throwing away stuff that it thinks that you don't need. And there's a bit rate of how severe that is happening. When I listen to serious radio music, it sounds horrible. Especially drums and cymbals sound like a... Sirius radio is roughly 64 kilobits a second compression. The minimum that we used to have on dial-up was like kind of 128 kilobits, so almost double. And here's the thing also. There's been a post going around of where they take a uncompressed audio and a lossy compression MP3 audio, and they do a phase trick so you can hear what has been removed. And people are like, wow, look at all the music that you're not hearing. But that's the point. It's actually, that's all the stuff it's removing that you can't hear, according to scientists and researchers who did the studies, to find out what our ear wouldn't hear if another type of sound was playing. So, of course there's going to be a difference. And that's what that sound is, obviously. That's the point. Please go check out, NPR did a piece that you can find online where you can hear the difference between an uncompressed and a compressed MP3 of 6 different songs. Some were classical, some were popular, some were, whatever. And almost everybody that took that test failed the test of finding out which one was the uncompressed compared to the compressed. I actually did pretty well, but there you go. MP3s are not particularly the devil. They're very handy. And that's the other thing that gets confused a lot on all of this stuff. We talk about compressed MP3s being terrible. Well, if you buy them, they often are terrible. If you buy them from iTunes or you got them from some place on the internet, they could be a YouTube rip of a 64, K, just like the Sirius radio, then recompressed up to a different level. And once that data is gone, it can't be added, so you're downloading something that you think is better. The internet's the Wild West. When you make your own MP3 from a uncompressed digital source, like a FLAC or a WAV file, the results are remarkably better than what you can buy commercially.